Hi, good morning, everyone. Can I just go to my first slide, if you wouldn't mind? Thank you very much. So CGI has been at the center of payments modernization worldwide, and I'm going to talk to you today not only about the world of payments, but actually a much broader perspective about what's happening in the world out there. And we've heard this morning all about the new technologies coming in, the opportunity of data and connected objects and blocks of chains or chains of blocks, and how this is going to change the world. And I just want to put that together because I think there's a piece of information that the people in this room really want to hear about, which is how fast is that pace of change and how soon is it going to happen? i.e. how soon do we as organizations really need to act to embrace what's going on? And to do that, I'm going to use some data. I think I could talk a lot about what's going on, but what's really important is actually what you and other organizations say in the market in terms of the pace of change and what do we want. And so I think the pace of change will really be dependent on the actions of the key stakeholders in the payments world. And that's a number of stakeholders. That's us as consumers. And I'm going to show you some of the data from a very recent survey of over 2,000 consumers across Western Europe and North America, as well as Asia, because we know that they're quite advanced in terms of consumerization. And that is going to be released in a little bit of time. So you'll hear this is new data coming into the market. I'm going to talk about institutional organizations interested in payments, and that's coming from two sets of data. That is the GT News survey, which was published last year, and in fact is going to be published again, sponsored by CGI in September, ready for the Cybos in Toronto, here again in Toronto. And we've also recently done a new piece of research amongst the major major payments players around the world. So that's about 350 organizations, asking them about their view of payments today and what's going to happen. And then finally, I'm also going to be using data from the very latest research from CGI, which is called Voice of the Client. Now, we go out and we interview, as part of our strategic planning process, over 1,000 client organizations, major client organizations in the established industries worldwide, to understand what they're seeing in their economy, in their businesses, in their industries, and asking them how they're going to react. So from this, we're going to get a really clear picture between people, the people involved in payments, as well as the broader economy, about the pace of change that is happening and how that's going to impact payments. And of course, there's central market infrastructures and regulators. Am I getting a bit of echo on this? No? I'm fine. Okay, good. All right, so let's start with the consumers. So this is from the consumer data. Now, almost 60% of consumers today, don't forget this is North American as well as Western European, want to have instant access to their money, and they want to be able to transfer it to wherever they want to at point of sale or account to account instantly, and they want to be able to do that 24/7. And that's today. That's what they want. Now, you can tell I'm from Europe, and we expect this. It's my money, and therefore I can transfer it. It's coming here too, and it's coming into the US. But this is a really key want from consumers today in terms of their money. But they also want it in terms of the right services as well as the protection piece. We've heard about this whole thing about digital identity. Consumers nowadays really are worried about their digital identity and their protection. So, and they see the banks really at the heart of this. But they also want rewards, and they also want that the organizations who are serving them to see them as an individual with individual needs. I think the issue, though, for us today is that 58% of consumers feel that their banks have lost connection with them. So there's a real worry with the banks today that we've lost, in this whole revolution that's going on in the world, that we've lost the contact with the banks. And I think the more damaging number is 54% are actually open to using non-banks for their core banking services. So that's really time to change for us as banks. Let's look at the corporate side. So again, this is from a large sample of Western Europe and North American corporates talking about their major banking provider. So last year, we saw a 19-degree fall in satisfaction with their main banker. And for the small to medium-sized enterprise corporates, that is even worse. It's 38%. And 58% of corporates are already using or intend to use non-bank services for payments, FX, and trade finance. So this is a world in change that we cannot ignore. This pace is happening. And what are they looking for? They're looking for this interoperability, this real-time connection. They're looking for seamless payments and the data coming back real-time. And in fact, we've heard a little bit about cross-border payments this morning. And when we asked them about interoperability of real-time, 64% believe there will be interoperability between real-time payments worldwide in 5 years' time. So this is global real-time payments knocking at our door in 5 years. And let's have a look at what's happening in the economy out there in all these industries. And we've heard this morning about integrated supply chains, Industry 4.0, personalized health, having your personal DNA in your medical records so you can have personalized medicines. This is all coming. But how fast is it coming? So this is the latest voice of our client data, just being released at the moment. And we see that 85% of established organizations worldwide are saying that their primary driver is to deliver services and change their organization model. So this is a business model change in order to meet the demands of their customers, both corporate and public, so citizen, consumer, as well as the corporate clients. And how are they transforming? So this is not a question of I may transform. How are they doing it this year? What's their strategy and their plan this year for doing that? So they're going to get data to optimize their business. They're going to change their business model. And look at this, almost 60% are experimenting with new technologies. So if we think in the banking industry and payments industry that blockchain is something that's going to come later, our clients of the banking system and payment system, 60% of them are already experimenting with new technology today. Now, by that I mean IoT, Internet of Things, blockchain, artificial intelligence, to name the 3 primary new technologies that they're looking at and thinking about how can I use these to transform my industry. And we as an industry need to be up there meeting that need as they transform their models. Now, of course, the payments industry itself and the regulators and the central market institutions are also driving this. And that's because payments modernization loosens up the dead zones in the economy. It's been quoted in Europe that going to real-time payments can add 2% of the GDP. Now, why is that? Because it makes the money transfer over the weekend. It means you can work over the weekend and get the liquidity in the market flowing. It means that you can invest better as a smaller business. You're more certain of your cash flows. It's a phenomenal boost to the economy going to real-time payments. And of course, it's not just real-time payments, because if we look over the water to Europe, where not only have we had several economies already at real-time payments, we're moving to Eurozone real-time payments, instant payments, SEPA instant payments, but we've also got this other piece of regulation coming in, Payment Services Directive 2, which I'm sure many of this room know about, which is saying actually anybody can be a payments initiator. It opens up the whole banking market in terms of payments and creates this open API economy for banking across a broad number of countries across Europe. So a significant change is happening and happening very fast. But what does this really mean in terms of the plans and strategies that you need to execute to be part of this change? So again, we know, if I look on the right-hand side, that many banking organizations still have in the background quite antiquated systems. And it means that those, over time, really need to be tackled, because the primary investment this is investment from the banking sector, from the voice of our client data. About 70% of banks today, Western Europe, North America, are saying, I'm going to invest in payments modernization and payments technology over the next 3 years. Phenomenal investment being put into the banks. And I know you'd probably wanted me to say that it wasn't the banks investing in this new infrastructure at all. It was somebody else going to do it. But in fact, this data does show that the banks are planning to put that investment in to payments modernization. But banks are also investing in data and being fast in terms of developing new products and services. So this is the agile digital development factories. And they're innovating their business models, and they are looking at new technology. So there's widespread acceptance that we are going to have to do this over the next 3 years. But payments modernization is just not a new rail, and I wanted to talk a little bit about, what's going to happen about payments as we move forward and what we're seeing in the payments world. Well, when we talk to the major payments players worldwide, I think we all see, and I think we saw it this morning very clearly, that checks and cash, and I'm sorry about the spelling of checks, I am British, I've spelt it the British way, is going to decline. So almost 3/4 of organizations say actually cash and checks is going to significantly go down as a payment instrument through to 2025. And a significant increase in account-to-account transfers, and particularly at point of sale. Point of that transaction, people want that instantaneous settlement and the payment and settlement and the transfer of the asset is happening at the same time. So a phenomenal move in that direction, whether that's blockchain or whether that's through instant payments on a blockchain, yet to be seen, but a real move in that direction. And we also asked the payments organizations, what are the technologies that you're going to use to really dominate and drive payments innovation through the next few years? And there's a slight difference between the retail side and the wholesale side. So let's go through the retail. So open APIs is a really critical piece in the retail side, and that's because it allows payments providers to connect to a really broad ecosystem in order to facilitate convenience for the consumer to do what they want to do. There's a lot of discussion in the market about the payments are unseen behind our day-to-day activities. And there's a huge rise in wearables technology, contactless cards, digital wallets. And so there's a big innovation, not just in terms of card types or digital wallets. You need to think more about how is it that people will transact. Will they have a wearable? Will things be voice activated? Will they be facial recognition? How will data follow a person so that you can think about how you innovate your services? Clearly real-time payments and mobile. So we know that a lot of the payments world is going onto a mobile as you are, where you are in the world, in the retail side. But let's talk about the wholesale side. So you may not think that APIs are important in wholesale banking, but they are, because if you look at the decrease in satisfaction with corporates with their main banks, a lot of that is because the financial system is divorced from what the corporate wants to do. And we have to get the two together. And hence the reason why APIs are so important in wholesale payments and thinking about a broader ecosystem. And the data enrichment around that. But I'd just like to quote a couple of numbers to you, which are not on this slide, because I think particularly in this cross-border piece, there's some very interesting data. So when we asked them about cross-border, they said by 2022, 77% of cross-border payments will be by distributed ledger. 5 years. Wow. That is a big jump in cross-border payments. And of that, they said 55% will be in digital currency. So those of you who rely on FX fees, I think, beware. Yeah. So the banks recognize what's going on. We asked the banks, do you think your customers will pay for value-add services through APIs, through really extending your services and innovating? And 80% are yes and maybe. Can you charge for it? Yes and maybe. So 80%. So we know the money's out there. The real issue, I think, today is that only about 30% of banks are today giving enough attention to the innovation around payment services. And that is really important, that we don't just concentrate on the rail. We concentrate on the value-add services, because that is where all the increase in the economic activity, the increase in new revenue streams into the banking system and for payments operators will come from. It's really important. And if I just show you what payments looks like today, I think this really shows how fast this innovation will happen. On the left-hand side, you can already see that payments has already changed quite substantially. You've got conversational commerce. You've got wearables. You've got connected devices. You can drive your car into McDonald's, pay for it, and you can pick it up, and you've never taken the card or put a pin or waved it in front of a machine. Your car's done it for you as you've driven through. And heads up to MasterCard with the Subway example as well. But you've got this whole conversational commerce coming up, so you've got to think about voice activation in your payments mix in terms of how you're innovating your services. But on the right-hand side is the piece about the standard payments products that you already rely on to drive the margins and the revenue stream in the traditional banking industry. And this is an article from a major newspaper in my home time, and it was talking about the difference in what TransferWise was charging for a cross-border international transfer versus what Santander, a major European bank, was charging. And if we take that statistic, that in 5 years' time, 77% of cross-border transfers will be on blockchain, and of those, 55% will be in digital currency, it won't be 64 euros, it'll probably be 2 euros. And this is what is coming really, really fast. So we've got to compete with new products and services. And we heard earlier, Amanda was talking about, are we asking the right question? Are we bringing a blanket instead of a hug? I think we have paid too much attention, and this is particularly aimed at the banks here, to a digital-first environment. And all of our consumer data says, and our corporate data says, that actually a physical relationship is just as important as a seamless digital relationship. And I'm not going to go through the data. You can read the data on the graphs. But what this means is that I think banks really need to understand that for important transactions in your own life, as well as a corporate, that personal relationship, but enriched with data, enriched in a real-time sense in terms of what your corporates or your customers are doing, can really drive meaningful long-term loyalty so that you can keep those customer relationships rather than the organizations such as Google, Amazon, or Apple. So I think there's hope, and I think there's a window of opportunity if we move fast. So let me wrap up. So all the stakeholders in the payments ecosystem are demanding really fast change to a digital real-time, seamless world, both domestically and internationally. And payments modernization is the cornerstone of that, and it's also the cornerstone of the transformation of the banking industry to be relevant and personal with its customers. But it needs value-add services, and the innovation of that, in those value-add services, is picking up pace, and the banks need to act today. And you've got a real opportunity to design that customer interaction about the most important thing in the capitalist world that we think about, which is our money, and how we're making it, keeping it, and building it for future generations. And I think we've got to get on that bandwagon really fast to move ahead, as well as for the greatness of Canada, as I heard a lot about today. So thank you very much.